Well, I think there's so many things hidden by people today that probably.
Jerry West never chased fame, it found him. He was the kid from Cabin Creek, the perfectionist who turned quiet rage into rhythm, and heartbreak into history. Every time that white silhouette appears on the NBA logo, it isn't just a player dribbling a ball. It's him, the man who carried the game's expectations on his shoulders and still felt he never did enough. At 86, the world called him the logo, but he still called himself a failure. He lost 8 NBA Finals before finally winning one in 1972. He won a Finals MVP in 1969, the only man ever to do it from the losing team. His 60-foot miracle shot in 1970 against New York? Another loss. Every defining moment came wrapped in pain, and somehow, that became his signature. Perfection through pain. Now, sitting in quiet reflection, Jerry West looks back on a lifetime spent chasing ghosts, not the defenders he beat, but the standards he set for himself. He remembers those who made him better, the 5 men he admired most. They weren't just opponents, they were mirrors showing him what greatness could look like in other forms: elegance, control, resilience, humility, power. This isn't nostalgia. It's confession. For Jerry West, basketball was never a game, it was a reckoning. The story that follows isn't about winning or losing, but about how respect, obsession, and endurance can define a man long after the buzzer fades. These are the 5 names that shaped the fire inside the logo. He starts with Elgin Baylor, the man who shared his battles, his frustrations, and the long nights when victory always seemed 1 inch away. Together they carried the Lakers through the 60s, dazzling crowds while losing series after series to Boston. Yet West never saw Baylor as a partner in pain. He saw him as grace itself. Elgin floated where others forced, turned movement into poetry, and made losing feel like art. He was elegance in motion, West once said, not out of habit but reverence. Baylor could score 60 in a finals game and never show a flicker of arrogance. He played through injuries, through disappointment, through the cruel math of an era that denied them both a ring. For West, watching Elgin was watching beauty refuse to die, even when luck and history stood against it. When Baylor retired early in the 1972 season, West felt a silence heavier than any defeat. Just months later, the Lakers finally won the title the very year Elgin walked away. West held the trophy high, but inside he thought of the man who never got to touch it. The ring sparkled, the cameras flashed, but the victory felt incomplete. That was the paradox of Jerry West. Even in triumph, he saw absence. Elgin Baylor was not just his teammate. He was the standard West measured himself against, the living proof that dignity could survive in a sport obsessed with dominance. Long after the cheers faded, West remembered the way Baylor moved, the way he smiled through failure. He didn't need the spotlight, West would whisper years later. It found him anyway. And in that quiet truth, he found the first name on his list of admiration, the one that taught him beauty could exist inside the ache. Then came Oscar Robertson, the man who made control look effortless. Where Baylor was art, Oscar was order. West remembered those nights against Cincinnati, when Oscar would glide into the half-court, eyes calm, body still, dictating everything without saying a word. He didn't overpower games, he conducted them. Every pass, every dribble, every glance felt deliberate, like a master sculptor shaping rhythm out of chaos. West admired him because Oscar never chased emotion. He owned it. In an era when tempers flared and egos collided, Robertson moved like a man who already knew the ending. He could score 30 without forcing a shot, rebound over giants, and set up teammates with a kind of cold precision that West could never quite replicate. It infuriated him and inspired him. They were opposites by nature. West lived in the storm, Oscar lived above it. Yet in every game they played, West saw something of the discipline he longed for. Robertson had learned to master the game from the inside out, while West was still fighting his own shadow. To Jerry, that was true greatness, not just talent, but control over self. Years later, when he built teams as a general manager, West often thought about Oscar. The patience. The structure. The calm under pressure. He realized the best players weren't the loudest or the flashiest, they were the ones who bent chaos without breaking. He didn't talk about being great, West once said. He just was. In Oscar Robertson, Jerry West saw a mirror he couldn't quite match, a reflection of what basketball looked like when perfection stopped hurting. And in that calm, he found a lesson that would follow him long after the game ended. Sometimes, the quietest players leave the deepest mark. And then there was Bill Russell, the one man Jerry West could never conquer, yet could never resent. Every time the Lakers stood on the brink of a title, Russell stood in the way, unshakable, unreadable, untouchable. Boston always found a way, and at the center of it all was Russell's presence, calm and absolute. For most players, those defeats would harden into bitterness. For West, they became something else, respect carved by pain. He still remembered the look on Russell's face after yet another finals loss in the 60s. No celebration, no taunting, just a nod of quiet understanding between rivals who knew what it took to stand there. West lost 8 times in the championship series, and Russell was responsible for nearly all of them. That could have built hatred. Instead, it built reverence. He always found ways to win, West would later admit. He made every possession feel like life or death. It wasn't the blocks or the rebounds that haunted him, it was Russell's composure, that invisible grip he held over the game. West could score 40, even 50, and it never mattered. The Celtics would still rise through sheer will. In 1969, when West was named Finals MVP despite losing once again to Boston, he accepted the trophy with a hollow smile. It was Russell's last game, and somehow the irony felt poetic. The man who'd tormented him the longest was walking away, victorious once more, leaving West to wrestle with the meaning of greatness. Over time, the bitterness faded, replaced by admiration. When Russell passed years later, West didn't speak much, he didn't have to. Everyone who knew him understood. Losing to Bill Russell had hurt more than anything else, but it also defined him. Without him, West once said softly, I might never have known how high greatness could reach. John Havlicek was different. He wasn't the biggest name, nor the loudest voice, but for Jerry West, he embodied everything the game demanded: consistency, humility, relentlessness. Havlicek was the worker who never stopped moving, the man who seemed to outrun fatigue itself. West admired that. Not the flash, not the records, but the refusal to quit. Every time they met, Havlicek came at him with the same intensity from tip-off to the final horn. There were no shortcuts, no drama, just effort. West could see it in the way John ran through screens, how he slipped past defenders, always in motion, always patient. He wasn't chasing glory, West once said. He was chasing the next play. In that simple obsession, West recognized himself. The two faced off countless times in the 60s, their duels woven into the history of Lakers-Celtics wars. West would pour in 40, sometimes 50 points, and still see Havlicek smiling across the court, drenched in sweat but never defeated in spirit. There was a purity in the way he competed, no taunts, no anger, only the rhythm of hard work done right. Years later, when West built rosters and mentored younger players, he often pointed to Havlicek as an example of what real professionalism looked like. Not everyone could be gifted, he'd say, but everyone could be prepared. He loved that Havlicek's greatness didn't come from talent alone, it came from repetition, from discipline, from knowing that every small detail mattered. To Jerry West, John Havlicek represented the kind of perfection that required no applause. He was proof that greatness could whisper instead of shout. And for a man who had spent his entire life battling his own perfectionism, West found comfort in that silence. Work ethic doesn't need to shine, he said once. It just needs to last. Then there was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the bridge between eras, the quiet giant who carried himself with the same dignity Jerry West had always admired. By the early 70s, Kareem was already redefining what basketball could look like: intellect meeting grace, calm wrapped in dominance. West remembered facing him when he was still Lou Alcine Dort with the Milwaukee Bucks, a young man with the skyhook that seemed to touch eternity. Every time that arcing shot left his hands, West saw the future. Kareem never shouted, never needed the noise. His focus was absolute. To West, that silence spoke volumes. He'd spent a lifetime chasing perfection through frustration, but Kareem embodied it without breaking a sweat. The discipline, the patience, the control, it was everything West had tried to master in himself. He didn't play angry, West said once, he played certain. Their paths crossed again when Jerry moved from the court to the front office, helping shape the Lakers that would become legends. He watched Kareem age with elegance, turning wisdom into a weapon. When the Showtime era arrived, West saw his reflection in the foundation Kareem built: professionalism, balance, respect for the craft. It wasn't about flash or rivalry anymore. It was about legacy. In Kareem, West found closure, the living answer to the question he'd asked his whole life. What if perfection didn't have to hurt? What if greatness could exist in peace? Watching Kareem raise the ball one last time, skyhook arcing over outstretched arms, West felt something he hadn't felt in years: serenity. The man behind the logo had finally learned from another master how to let go. As the crowd roared for Kareem's final farewell, Jerry West stood in the shadows, smiling. He knew now that perfection wasn't about winning every time. It was about lasting long enough for your lessons to outlive the noise. When the game finally went silent, Jerry West was left with the echo of his own pursuit. The man behind the NBA's logo had spent a lifetime chasing perfection, only to discover it was never meant to be caught. In the stillness of his later years, he thought of the 5 men who had shaped his journey: Baylor's grace, Robertson's control, Russell's composure, Havlicek's work ethic, and Kareem's calm wisdom. Each had taught him something about greatness that statistics could never measure. He understood now that perfection wasn't about winning, it was about enduring, about giving yourself completely to something that could break your heart and doing it again anyway. The pain he once cursed had become his teacher, the quiet truth behind every victory and every loss. Perfection, he murmured once, isn't a destination. It's the path itself. As the lights faded on the empty court, the outline of the logo remained: a man in motion, forever chasing something just beyond reach. And in that endless pursuit, Jerry West had found his peace. Which of these 5 names, he wondered, still defines what basketball means to you?